pressing issue isn't just the extent of these actions, but why the enforcement of our borders is suddenly being labeled as tyranny. Who stands to gain from this turmoil, and what implications does it hold for American families? Breaking news today, federal agents and thousands of National Guard troops are currently conducting operations throughout Los Angeles.
Hello, and welcome to That News Show, where we discuss the latest facts, fakes, and hypocrisy as reported by the legacy media. Let's roll the tape.
Molson BC reports gone too far. New evidence Trump and Stephen Miller are losing the battle over ICE raids. What we're witnessing is not a loss, but a deliberate effort by Democratic officials, media elites, and their judicial allies to thwart any genuine border enforcement initiatives. Is it too much for the political class that has long overlooked the chaos at the border? Why does a call for sovereignty from Americans consistently meet with demands for its surrender? Now, attempts by the White House to restore order are branded as tyranny. Or for the activists who view enforcing immigration laws as un-American? Let the show begin.
Today, Trump was gloating over an appellate court decision that, for now, allows him to continue to deploy California's National Guard to L.A. over the repeated objections of Governor Gavin Newsom. Also today, Vice President JD Vance traveled to L.A. to take his tour of the city. This is, a week and a half or more after the burning of the Waymos that precipitated the sending in the troops. That's the guy, you'll remember, spread the lie that migrants in Ohio were eating animals off the street last year. And he used his remarks moments ago to spread the lie that California is a leftist rogue state that deserves the police state treatment.
We have a public official in Gavin Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, who over the past few years have actively encouraged illegal migration into the...
Public opinion may show waning support for aggressive enforcement tactics, yet most Americans remain concerned about illegal immigration and desire effective solutions, not mere virtue signaling from politicians unwilling to enforce the law. Claims that California is unfairly targeted or that federal actions resemble a police state are merely tactics to shift blame. The selective outrage from progressives and their media allies typically defends lawlessness when it suits their political goals, ignoring the cost to Americans who face the consequences of unchecked migration. The true issue is the failure of progressive policies in California, necessitating federal action to ensure national security and uphold the rule of law. The deployment of thousands of California National Guard troops and Marines to Los Angeles, now supported by a federal appellate court, stems directly from the failure of state and local leadership to enforce basic immigration laws. The administration's use of the National Guard is not an affront to democracy, but a defense of it against local officials who have failed their constituents. This has led to a surge in illegal immigration, strained public services, and eroded public trust. When federal agencies step in to restore order, the same politicians responsible for the issues accuse the administration of overreaching. The resistance from California's political leaders is an attempt to divert attention from their failures. Governor Newsom's lawsuit and public objections amount to political theater aimed at rallying his base rather than solving real problems. The court's decision highlights the president's broad authority in matters of national security and border control, which Congress has consistently supported. The media often overlooks that federal law enforcement actions primarily target lawbreakers. Despite objections from Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass, the federal government has the right and duty to intervene when local officials do not cooperate with national immigration enforcement. Local leaders have promoted sanctuary policies, signaling a disregard for federal law.
Right to not be roughed up by masked men holding long guns. Even the country's most popular pro-Trump podcaster, Joe Rogan, much has been made about his support for Donald Trump during the campaign, made a pretty important point this week that American voters, the vast majority of them, did not vote for this.
Indeed, the vast majority of voters did not endorse this militarized approach to immigration enforcement, and polling confirms this. Opposition to these tactics has risen sharply, with more than half of Americans now disapproving of large-scale raids and military deployments in cities like Los Angeles. When the Los Angeles Dodgers bar ICE agents from their stadium and clergy physically accompany immigrants to court to shield them from detention, it's clear that this is not just a partisan dispute, but a crisis of legitimacy for federal enforcement. Mutted agents wielding rifles and detaining workers in parking lots. This is not the image of American law enforcement most citizens recognize or support. Republican leadership must recognize that the path to real immigration reform is not through brute force or mass roundups, but through policies that secure the border, protect American workers, and respect civil liberties. When even Joe Rogan, who has previously been sympathetic to Republican causes and commands a massive audience across the political spectrum, calls out these raids as overreach. It signals a significant disconnect between the intentions of policymakers and the will of the American people. Instead, it erodes trust in law enforcement, discourages cooperation with authorities, and undermines the rule of law that conservatives have long championed. There are real consequences when enforcement crosses the line from upholding the law to instilling fear in communities. The coming months will test whether Republican leaders can adapt and respond to the legitimate concerns of voters, or whether they will double down on tactics that alienate the very people they claim to represent. The previous Democrat administration under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris failed to enforce the law and encouraged sanctuary policies that contributed to this mess. But the answer is not to swing the pendulum so far in the other direction that we lose sight of core American values. The stakes are high, not just for the party, but for the country's future as a constitutional republic. Conservatives have historically warned about the dangers of centralized authority overriding local governance, and this situation underscores why those checks and balances are crucial. The resistance from California's political class is expected, but the broader institutional pushback from churches, community groups, even sports organizations exposes how deeply unpopular these measures have become. Targeting workers at places like Home Depot or Walmart, where the overwhelming majority have no violent criminal record, does little to enhance public safety. If the party wants to maintain the support of independent voters in the working class, it must reject the influence of globalist elites and bureaucrats who view ordinary Americans as obstacles to their ideological projects.
It is crazy. I mean, that's what Stephen Miller wants. He wants to construct a police state so as to abduct, incarcerate, and deport 13 million people. And yet, despite all the protests from every part of the political spectrum, Trump's Border Patrol is making propaganda videos of its armed agents locking and loading for warfare in full military fatigues and body armor en masse to raid a suburban flea market and ask patrons where they are from. Again, the administration thinks all this plays to Trump's strengths. I mean, you can see, like, Stephen Miller, like, popping a vein in his head of how much he enjoys this. Yet get this, ready? Trump's polling on immigration, historically one of his strongest issues, genuinely a huge strength during the campaign, there's no question. It's nosediving.
In reality, these operations primarily target individuals who have violated federal law, aiming to restore order in cities where local authorities have faltered. While some surveys indicate reduced approval for specific tactics like workplace raids, a majority of Americans remain concerned about illegal immigration and advocate for stronger border controls. This selective outrage serves more as advocacy than journalism, failing to provide viewers with a complete view of the facts. This approach lacks balance, seldom featuring perspectives from law enforcement, legal experts, or citizens who support border security. MSNBC's focus on the perceived excesses of enforcement ignores the real-world impacts of unchecked migration on American workers, public safety, and legal system integrity. This is in stark contrast to the previous lack of action and the current opposition from Democratic officials who prioritize political theater over practical solutions. For Republican leadership, the lesson is to balance robust enforcement with respect for civil liberties and federalism, without yielding to media-driven hysteria or the ineffective policies of globalist elites. MSNBC's coverage often conflates these issues, misleading viewers about public opinion. This portrayal overlooks the legal and constitutional grounds for federal intervention, which courts have upheld, especially when local officials resist cooperation. The network's focus on emotional appeals, such as highlighting resistance or celebrity protests, and its reliance on dramatic footage skew the narrative. The stakes are high, and the country cannot afford a repeat of unfulfilled promises and political posturing. Such storytelling is designed more to provoke outrage than foster understanding.
Quinnipiac poll earlier this month showed Trump underwater by 11 points on immigration. 54% disapprove. And when you narrow the question down to Trump's deportation policy, the numbers are even worse for him. He is underwater by 16 points.
Other respected surveys like the CBS News poll, conducted just before the latest protests, show that 54% of Americans actually support the administration's deportation efforts. Despite the clamor from activist groups and the media, the core issue persists. Should the United States enforce its immigration laws or allow local officials and special interests to override national policy? Polls may show President Trump trailing by 11 points on immigration and by 16 points on his deportation policy, but these figures don't capture the full picture. As the debate unfolds, it's clear that the stakes are not only political, but also economic and deeply personal for millions of Americans. From an economic standpoint, the immigration enforcement debate extends beyond border security and humanitarian concerns. It directly impacts the financial well-being of American families and the overall economy. When public trust in the rule of law weakens, investments stall, consumer confidence wanes, and borrowing costs rise. The Quinnipiac poll reflects a moment of intense emotion and media-driven outrage, especially after recent enforcement actions in sanctuary cities. Meanwhile, the globalist elite and their allies in the Democratic Party advocate for policies that favor multinational corporations and erode national sovereignty. They face higher local taxes, longer waits at emergency rooms, and fewer opportunities for their children. Households are feeling the pinch as grocery, rent, and gas prices climb, while real wage growth remains sluggish. Uncertainty about labor markets and government policies makes it difficult for small businesses to plan ahead, while large corporations capitalize on the turmoil. For working and middle-class Americans, the costs of unchecked illegal immigration are tangible. A secure border and a fair labor market are essential for economic stability and upward mobility. They dismiss enforcement efforts as cruel or authoritarian, ignoring the economic hardships ordinary citizens endure. This creates a two-tiered economy, one where the well-connected prosper and everyone else struggles. While small businesses might benefit from lower labor costs in the short term, the long-term consequences include a labor market skewed by unfair competition and increased strain on public services. Can you believe this? The media claims that enforcing our immigration laws signifies defeat, portraying the White House as losing for prioritizing American interests. Consider who truly benefits from open borders and lawlessness. The reality is clear. National sovereignty is non-negotiable, and no media spin can alter that fact. Now, as President Trump works to restore order and sovereignty, those who let us down are the first to object. The previous administration, led by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, spent years weakening our borders, creating chaos, and neglecting the concerns of working Americans. If defending your country is deemed controversial, perhaps controversy is precisely what we need. This isn't about compassion or justice. It's about power, because a secure border diminishes their control. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your comments below. This has been That News Show. That's all I have for now.